Welcome, everybody. It's such an unusual way for us to commune. In fact, for me, I'd like to hug each one of you. And I guess this is really enforcing 6 feet of difference. So we're honoring each other's well-being and keeping some healthy distance. I'd like to say a few things before I encourage you to open up the class readers with me. This work, I've been doing this work now for over 30 years. This particular moment in time is asking something else of us. We're dealing with something that we never could have foreseen. Certainly I didn't foresee. So the level of loss that we are experiencing is extraordinary. And one of the things to say in the very beginning, when losses combine, they don't add up 1 plus 1. They add up exponentially. The reason being is that every primary loss has secondary losses. When we have many primary losses, we have a whole bunch of secondary losses. And they're all affecting how we feel, what we're doing, and how we're talking about what's going on. The other thing I want to say, and this is further on in the booklet, the reader that I prepared, there is a concept that is a global concept that has actually been in action now for several years. It took some very clever person to name it. It's made up of 2 words. One word is solitude. The other word is nostalgia. This gentleman, and I have an article in your reader, has coined this phrase as solastalgia. It's the loss of hope in the present and the future. It is a homesickness for what we've known. And it shows itself as a global malaise. And this is a universal experience. And different places have different losses that are highly active. So when I taught in South Africa, we had to name animal extinction, poaching, killing elephants, rhinos, zebra, giraffe. That is a tremendously deep pain. It's global. Yet in South Africa, it was around their corner. It was right there. So as I'm presenting, if you've got pen and paper there, you might jot down some things that have not been named as losses. You may realize that something that's been crunching your heart and contracting your belly is actually a loss that hasn't been named. So I also want to tell you that if anybody wants contact with me after this, I will very graciously give anybody 15 or 20 minutes, no obligation. If anybody's interested in doing an actual session, get in touch with me and we'll take a look at that. And Zoom is really quite efficient. So people are calling it telemedicine. I think that's an appropriate way to acknowledge that much that we would do up front next to one another is now being done with technology. So what I'd like you to do, and I have my reader right next door, right here with me, I want to define grief for you. So I'm going to ask you, now if you don't have your booklet, that's fine. If you choose to print it out, having it at your fingertips can be efficient. You can also feel free to copy anything I've given you and share it with people. And I just ask to keep the integrity high. Just leave my name on it. Just leave my data. Feel free to share it with whomever might benefit. So let's talk about
the reader's in the chat. The reader is in the chat.
Oh, good. Okay. Okay. So first I'm going to say, what is grief? Grief is the human's response to loss, and it's the most available, untapped emotional resource for personal transformation. Most of the time, people will just say things like, you'll get over it, don't worry about it, time will heal all wounds. The truth is, grief is actually an emotional response in both the body and a psychological response in the mind. Loss precedes grief. Often you'll see somebody putting out a flyer or writing something and they'll say grief and loss and grief and loss. It's really a misnomer to speak that way because it's after loss that the human experience is grief. And it's not just loss of humanity. It's loss of anything that we cherish, anything that we're attached to, anything that we reference in our sphere of being who we are. And another point I'd like to make, which of course I hear from colleagues, and I really want to clarify this, and we'll be writing on this. Grief is not the price we pay for love. What actually happens to the human being is the suffering occurs due to the attachment being broken. My sister Donna, Harriet mentioned her, my sister Donna died in 2002 of metastatic breast cancer. I didn't grieve and don't grieve for her on her birthday or my birthday or a day Thanksgiving was her favorite holiday we'd spend together. I grieve because I can't be with her. I grieve because she's not here. I grieve because I want to hug her. I grieve because I want to talk to somebody about my mother who knew my mother very well. I grieve because Donna's not available to me the way she once was, not because I love her. I will always love my sister. So please note, you don't suffer because you love. We as humans attach when we're babies, and when we lose the connection, we grieve because we can feel a withdrawal of the molecular connections. We call it cording. We connect with somebody, umbilicus to umbilicus, in a psychic connection. We invest our love in the connection. And when they die, we withdraw our energy because they can't receive from us the same way. So keep in mind, if anybody tells you, well, you loved him so much or you loved her so much, that's why. No, I still love that person or that puppy or that house so much. I grieve because the new place doesn't have a clawfoot bathtub or a window over the sink. I grieve the things that are taken from me that I'm attached to. There are degrees of grief. My sister Donna was a million, zillion, trillion degrees. When I lost a favorite necklace, maybe 5 degrees, 10 degrees. So I look at grief in degrees of impact, of investment, connection, and familiarity. So I want to read something to you that's in your reader that's from 1993. Now, why would I go back so far? Because this hasn't changed. And even newer definitions are not as efficient as this. So I will read this. The basic physiological and psychological concomitants, different angles and aspects of grief, are universal throughout humankind. However, the events that warrant grief, in this case, COVID-19, the way people respond to those events, us versus Africa or England, and the process of recovering from grief are very much determined by culture, values, and practices of a society. So grief is pictured as a normal emotion with significant differences to be expected from one culture, one religion, one focus, one philosophy. We're all in this together. And we all express our grief in different ways. And I'd like to quote Elizabeth Kubler-Ross right here, who says, we have a choice to either express or repress. And of course, her choice was always to teach us different methodologies for expression. And if your mind just jumps here, that's why expressive arts are so valuable. It's not about being a Picasso or a Salvador Dali. It's about taking our truth and allowing it to exit on paper, in collage, in altar making, in taking a body and outlining the body and then filling it in with color. It's a way for us to normalize what we're feeling, because grief scatters and shatters linear thinking. So sometimes we're not even sure or how to name something, or what to call it, and who we can tell. And sometimes we're embarrassed because we think, well, God, it was my puppy, but it was her mother. You know, each person's loss is unique to their experience, for their feelings, for their story, their tapestry of their life's legacy of loss. We're not victimized by loss. Loss is part of the human condition. Therefore, learning to live with grief, transform grief, acknowledge the grief, and cleverly learn to locate the grief, because grief that we don't attend to becomes embodied. And the body is the barometer of our truth. So if one of you said, gee, Lyn, how are you feeling? And I have a headache, I might say, I'm just fine. But if I say to my body, hey, body, how are you feeling? It's not going to tell me fine. It's going to highlight for me, you have a headache you need to deal with, or a bellyache, or my foot, or my hand, or whatever. So what do we do with the mind? We use it as a tool. When we are grieving, our minds are not our friends. Really important. The body has a mind, and the mind has a body. Yet the mind does not like unanswered questions. So think of it like a computer program that if you don't fill in the previous line, you can't go to the next question. Sometimes the mind will say, just give me an answer and I'll stop rotating, coming back to it, back to it. The mind has a body and the body has a mind, and the body's your friend and the mind's a tool, and a very important one. The mind helped me get here at 5 minutes before the hour to be ready. The mind is used and we need it. The mind without a body, body without a mind doesn't survive. So it's important for us to recognize what to trust when we're looking internally. And the yogis say we have 2 eyes that look outward and 1 eye that looks in. We often reference it as the third eye. Well, interestingly enough, it's right in front of the pineal gland or pineal gland, which is one of the master regulators of the endocrine system. And all of the shock that we are experiencing on a daily basis, listening to the news, hearing the mortality rate, it's up to 32,000 people at this point. The pineal gland is a gland that, if worked with, it's a photoactive gland. And you have a process in here because the first half of your reader is informational. And the second half of your reader, or 2/3 and a third, I could count, I don't need to, is experiential suggestions for all of you. It's a way that you can actually say, what do I want to do for me to transform the grief I'm feeling, whether it's my own or it's vicarious because somebody else I know is suffering. So I'm born in New York, in case you can't tell from my Bronx accent. I work very hard to sound like I'm from everywhere. The truth is, we must recognize in a case like this, New York's been hard hit. So because I'm born there, I have my unique connection with New York. And I lived in San Francisco many, 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 many years. These are my hometowns. And so when I hear about what's going on, I feel it somatically in the body. That's why, as a thanatologist, which is a death, dying, and bereavement educator, I call myself a somatic thanatologist, because I believe that if we don't address what's going on in the body, we're missing half of the information. Thus, somatic thanatology. So those of us who are learning to love our bodies, learning to trust our bodies, they are incredible tools for our consciousness. Now, loss. Loss precedes grief. Grief occurs when we lose the familiar. So let me boil this down just a bit before I go to our loss awareness list. I'll use my sister again. I was used to her being alive in my life. I liked that. Metastatic breast cancer had a different outcome in mind. She died at 49. I'm older. I always watched out for her. I couldn't save, rescue, or fix. It's very important. The only thing we really can do for another is serve them, hear them. Above all, grieving people need to be heard. So when we're talking about different losses, in the case of my sister, I had to spend good hours in solitude, reviewing my life and taking the time to find the best way to honor her. So tonight, I'm actually going to dedicate this work to her. My sister Donna, who died at 49, who's been one of my guiding teachers, as my late husband was, who died, and still is, at the Living Dying Project, with the help of Stephen and Andrea Levine and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. After this presentation this evening, tomorrow I'm going to put together a resource list for you and send it to Reverend Carolyn, so that you can see some of the books I recommend, videos, or teachers that I think will be supportive and worth the time to explore. All loss can be filtered down to the loss of the familiar. Just 2 months ago, we could go out without thinking twice about covering our faces. Just 2 months ago, handshaking. I'm a hugger. Hugs boost our immune system. I love to hug. We can't hug now. Perhaps an intimate person here and there. Yet I always hugged a client when they came, so certainly when they left a session if they were available for that. Now it's blinking elbows, bunking elbows, fist bumping. It's almost like a new age way to relate. In fact, it might actually be. And many who have called and asked the question, when are we going to get to be together again like we're used to? And that's an unknown. So I am very, as I look into our future, there's more unknowns than knowns. So one of the ways I work is with questions, because the answers reside in the questions. And it's really okay to not know, because that gives us the possibility then of knowing. So as I introduce you to the loss awareness list, I want you to remember each of these losses that changes what was is the loss of the familiar. And it's one way that the mind can actually relate to the concept. Because I called a very dear colleague who's a wonderful therapist, and I said, how do we help people relate to all this information? And she said, the mind struggles to actually grasp this depth of new information and the seriousness and the mortal aspect of it. She said, I advise people to stay in their hearts, check with their guts, deep breathe, and trust their intuition. Listen to the guidelines. And I thought that was very valuable, and I thanked her. She's also 82 years old and has severe asthma, living in Marin County. I'm concerned about her health. So I called for those both reasons. Now, losses. We have tangible losses, such as personal possessions, money, our pets, our jobs, stocks and bonds, which we're certainly not going to dwell on at this moment, our residence, our cars. We have developmental losses, loss of fertility, loss of mobility, loss of skin tone, loss of hearing, loss of natural hair color, and loss of control of body temperature, which when I was teaching at UC Berkeley for 14 years, I would always preface this for the women in the group. Loss of body temperature is a big deal. I used to know how to dress before menopause. When menopause happened, I was clueless. I know I gave away all my turtlenecks and anything that went over my head so I could unbutton quickly. Loss of body temperature, one of the humbling parts of a woman's maturing. Now, loss of self through physical illness, divorce, a spouse's death, job loss, retirement, substance abuse, abortion, surgery, and I added through COVID-19, our loss of routine, our loss of connectability as we're used to, and also loss of self through physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. Let's go to some abstract losses. Loss of dreams, loss of faith, hope, and trust, loss of childhood innocence, loss of sense of humor, personality, femininity, virility, loss of quality of life. That would apply now. How can we create the same quality of life being quarantined as we might going out here and there, going to a concert, going to a party? People are having cyber birthday parties. Everything is different now, and it's soon. It's really soon for us to understand the depth of what we're dealing with, because as we agreed to quarantine, and then as we agree to wear masks, agree not to touch, agree not to go out, we're learning how to live with these changes that are losses of our routines. Let's also go here to loss of others, spouse, children, partners, parents, friends, grandchildren, siblings, through separation, through moving, through divorce, through job loss. Somebody who loses their job also loses their daytime family, their colleagues that they spend sometimes more time with than their actual relatives at home. Through miscarriage, through abortion, through drug use. And here's 3 COVID-19 losses of others. Through social distancing, through your absence and their absence due to COVID-19. And here's a very big one, and I don't have much information, I've been looking. No bedside goodbyes. Now be with that for a moment. No bedside goodbyes to say, bye-bye, Grandma, or Donna, my sister, I love you. Or watch that last breath, see that body, and know. Stephen Levine always said, if we can view the body, it helps the griever process the change. It's impossible now. And so I've been researching, what are we going to do? Are we going to dig 32,000 single graves? What are we going to do with the deceased? What are we going to do with their bodies? And I don't know. I know there's makeshift morgues in refrigerator trucks. I don't know more. When I do, I'd be glad to share it. I don't know, because one of the rituals that this culture has gotten very attached to is the funeral, is the showing of the body in some religions, is the gathering afterward at a wake, or for the Jewish religion, a shiva. And that's taken from us. Even siblings that live in California and New York can't hug each other when dad dies. Very difficult. And I don't believe we have all the proper information yet, because that's why I put an article in here about the value and meaning of rituals, why rituals work, why making an altar, why planting a tree in their honor, or making a donation to their favorite charity. We are struggling as a culture to know how to honor the deceased. And that, of course, hopefully will begin to show itself. So this loss awareness list is something in your reader, and I'd like you to look at it, and perhaps there's a loss I didn't mention. Senior moments are a loss. Loss of direction. Let's say a person's going to say something that went, oh, I lost my train of thought. Notice how people speak colloquially and tell you what's going on, and often are not even aware of how much information they may be giving us. And so when I work with a client, I listen to the words they use to help me understand, how did they function? What makes them them? How does their system respond? How would my commenting soothe their broken hearts? If I'm listening closely, I'll actually be able to use some of their words. Now you have something in here which is very disturbing and very powerful. I'm just going to tell you what it is. I'll let you look. It's 23, now 24 cuts to programs that many of us believed in. I have 23 on this list. You've got this list. 24th is withdrawing money from the World Health Organization, for those of us who've been following. These 24 losses have happened in 3 years. What am I referring to? The Endangered Species Act, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, the Farmland Protection Policy Act, the Noise Control Act, the Archaeological Resources Protection Act, the National Fish and Wildlife Act. These are all losses. Now, for some, they might be gains. For me, as an environmentalist, these are huge losses. Each of you will read this list and you'll see what happens in your body. If you can nostril breathe through difficulty, nostril breathing keeps panic and anxiety at a minimum. If you can read one of these and say, oh, I felt that in my belly. Oh, I felt that in my throat. I can barely read that sentence. It will help you understand how the body, the barometer of your truth, is registering information. Everything in your reader is to raise consciousness. Everything in your reader is my service to you, to support you through a time where words often fail. And trust in ourselves is optimally important. Now, to serve you fully, I must talk a bit about trauma. I have studied with Bessel van der Kolk, one of the top traumatologists. On my website, there's an interview with him. Grief and trauma are specifically unique, how they relate and when they don't. Trauma is a sudden, unexpected, unpredicted, horrific, unthinkable, shocking occurrence or event. In this case, it's either momentary or it's continual. We could not have imagined that they're talking that we will not be rid of the virus in the fall. We will be seeing upsurges. But until they can either test or vaccine or provide a vaccine, they are not saying it's going away. They're hoping we can control it. So this is a trauma that is continually impacting us because it was unexpected and unpredicted. Yes, the World Health Organization said they put out a universal proclamation on the 5th of January to be careful for this virus. Many of us did not get that news until we were told put on a mask and gloves and stay separate. Researchers are warning that the coronavirus pandemic could inflict long-lasting emotional trauma and on an unprecedented global scale. We need to know this, and self-care maybe has never been more important. The COVID-19 crisis has combined mental health stressors that have been studied before in other disasters, but have never been seen consolidated in one global health crisis. Experts in trauma psychology have said we must tune in. I recently heard that sometimes if a person's on a respirator for a week to 10 days, they have memory loss and confusion afterward. Not everybody. And Reverend Carol and I were talking about this with sense of smell and sense of taste. It's the olfactory nerve, which is the most efficient way that information gets to the brain, through scent, through aroma, through lavender or frankincense, goes right to the brain, stimulates the limbic system, and registers as this is for me. The scale of this outbreak as a traumatic event is beyond comprehension. So when you're talking to your loved ones and you're talking to colleagues, and you're looking for the words that describe what's going on, be gentle with yourself, because the experts are struggling to put this in parentheses. Trauma on the level of pathology is a body wound or shock produced by sudden physical injury, as from violence or accident. There's the World Trade Center and the Boston Marathon, Katrina in New Orleans. The condition produced by trauma is called traumatization. In psychiatry, trauma is referred to as an experience that produces psychological injury or pain. The psychological injury so caused, whether it's depression, anxiety. I'm finding lots of anxiety in the clients I'm working with. So one thing for anxiety that's fabulous is bergamot essential oil, lavender essential oil, Roman chamomile essential oil. And anybody who wants more, like if you want my list of oils, you have my email. I'll give you the 10 top oils for bereavement and for grief. My intention here was to give you the best quality information and stimulate your thinking. What talks to you? What piques your curiosity? The operative word for trauma is terror. The operative word for grief is sadness. So if somebody says, I'm terrorized, understand the depth of the impact. And fresh trauma and fresh loss will bring up prior incidents of the like. A fresh loss will bring up my loss of my sister, loss of my husband, loss of whatever. And a recent trauma might bring up the thoughts of the World Trade Towers and something else that might have occurred. How about the volcano eruption in New Zealand? So your minds will take you to different places. Honor that. Ask your minds, what are we looking at and what are we looking for? Now, the symptoms of psychological trauma: shock, denial, disbelief, confusion, difficulty, anxiety, fear, guilt, shame, self-blame, withdrawing from others, feeling sad or hopeless, feeling disconnected or numb. Some of these apply to grief as well. Here's the bottom line. You can have loss without it being traumatic. My example is my father's mother died at 101 years old. She was ready to go. It would not be considered a traumatic loss. Yet the family I worked with whose 5-year-old drowned, that's a traumatic loss. All trauma is grievous. Because with trauma, there's loss. There's loss of the moment. The Boston Marathon was a race until it was a crisis center with legs and arms missing, with people not running, lying on the ground with glass and metal in their hearts and bellies. So trauma always involves loss. Loss does not always involve trauma. People will often use it was so traumatic. Well, they may have been personally traumatized by something that is not called a traumatic loss. We honor that. I also have here factoids for you. I'll let you read those. I'm stimulating your curiosity, hopefully, to pick up the reader. If you print it out, you're going to find things there that you're going to want to share with other people. I put this in just so you could have this as a reference. Let's see if I can give you the best viewing possible. Here's what I want you to know about this. We have two nervous systems that are key in this conversation with us tonight. It's the autonomic nervous system. One branch is called sympathetic. The other branch is called parasympathetic. And I'm going to make it very easy for you. Use alliteration. Parasympathetic is the peaceful nervous system that we want to continually return to. The sympathetic is where the stress is, with fight, flight, or fright. The tools I've given you and the exercises I've given you are all to transport you from the stressful sympathetic nervous system, where we sweat, we get hot, we get cold, we shake, to the parasympathetic, where we feel like we're in a warm bath, or in our mom's arms, or in the most sacred place in the universe. We exalt our well-being in the parasympathetic nervous system. So you have a chart. You can take a look at it. It has little tidbits. Now, the physiology of grief is similar to the physiology of trauma. It's not as dramatic, yet it's equally impactful. And where it mirrors that is in the social isolation, the withdrawal, the depression, the moodiness, and the negativity. Where it's unique, although these may be in action right now, it sets the emotional tone of the body. In fact, let's do something together. Take your left hand, put it on your heart, and then take your right hand and put it on top, and just take a sincere, deep breath. And when you exhale, you can even make a little sound if you want. This is compassion to self. In the Buddha's language, the Pali language, it's called metta bhavana. It's compassion to self. And many of us forget to take that time to thank ourselves for our courage, to acknowledge the impact, the vicarious sense, the exchange of deep feelings. For those of you who are empaths, you know exactly what I'm talking about. This is a way to say, you know, Lynn, you did good work today. Thank you for the courage to talk to this young person about the suicide of their sister. Or talk to me about the car accident or the volcano eruption again. Because I'm an empath, I feel it. Therefore, I have to do self-care after so I don't carry it. Because my heart and my body doesn't know the difference. If I'm experiencing the words that are describing grief, I feel them. I have to tell my heart and my body, you can let that go. It's not ours. We let that go through us with nostril breathing. And grieving people need to tell their story again and again and again. Because above all, grieving people need to be heard. So they need to hear themselves tell their story as well. It could be 4 weeks of repetition. It could be 6 or 8 weeks. We're trained to know that if a person is repeating their story, they need to. And we acknowledge, yes, I do remember that. If you need to take notes as a practitioner, do. If you don't, and you can remember the person's name, it's like giving the bereaved a gift. Your brother Jimmy, your sister Donna. It's like, oh my God, I was listened to. They heard me. As far as the field of psychoneuroimmunology, I want to tell you, and I'll include Dr. Candace Pert's book, called Molecules of Emotion, that psychoneuroimmunology works with the psyche, the immune system, and the neurological system. And we're being impacted in all these systems, dealing with the estrangement from our friends, our loved ones, our coffee dates at Pete's or at Starbucks, the walk you take at lunchtime, unless you're 6 feet apart. So you get to name your losses because your losses are meaningful to you. And don't let anybody tell you that what you are experiencing loss about is any less important than what they are experiencing. Now you have something else in your reader called, I don't expect you to fully get it, but take a peek, Feeling Faces. Because if you're working with kids or you have teenagers in your sphere, this is a really good way if they can't tell you what's going on. Okay, Bobby, I know you're 15, you're not very talkative, you don't want to share your emotions. Show me on this chart what's going on for you. It's good with kids, it's good with the elderly, it's good with people who've had strokes. It's also very good cross-culturally because I can erase the words and leave them blank, or I can fill them in Spanish because I'm bilingual and I work in Spanish, so I have a Spanish one where they can say, this is what I'm feeling, destroyed, sad. So that's yours, and I didn't design it. If my name's on it for the booklet, that's one thing. In this, I didn't because this is not my chart, and I use it a lot. It's a good chart. Now, I want to give you another important piece. We will not get to cover everything that I've prepared for you. I'm doing my best to make sure you get some very deep, important basics, such as the concept of STUGS, S-T-U-G-S, and that's page 12 in your booklet. Sudden temporary upsurges of grief. So, let's say Mr. Jones, let's say you used to shop for Mr. Jones. You'd go shopping and you'd say, hey, Mr. Jones, can I pick up anything for you at Whole Foods or at Safeway or Wild Oats? And he says, sure, you know, I love their granola. Great. Well, let's say Mr. Jones dies from COVID-19. And the next time you go shopping, you see his favorite granola. You could literally have a stug, an upsurge of grief that overtakes you and brings tears to your eyes, or deep breathing or cathartic breathing, because the body's responding to the stimulus of seeing the granola, connecting it to Mr. Jones, and you can't buy it for him now because he's not there. You could buy it for you or not buy it at all. So a song, a sight, a sound, a memory, a thought, anything can stimulate a stug, a sudden temporary upsurge of grief. And in your book, you'll see a name, it'll say Therese Rando. Dr. Rando is brilliant, written many books, and this is hers. She coined STUGS. And that is one of the most valuable things when I do grief counseling sessions, that I make sure that they know about STUGS. It's very important because sometimes people think they're going crazy. They're fine and all of a sudden they're crying. Human beings are quirky, and STUGS explain it if it's due to loss. Now, I want to also tell you that, and this is to be taken very seriously and used very carefully, if you feel that you are so extremely reactivated, anxious, tense, and you need to take care of something. If you close your right nostril and you breathe through the left, and here, I love alliteration. So I told you, parasympathetic, peaceful, sympathetic, stressful. I'm going to tell you now that the left nostril is the lunar nostril, and Lyn told you so. So you use the L to remember. And when you need to calm yourself, you close the hot nostril, which is the right nostril, which is daytime, masculine, action, accomplishment. Left, lunar, calming, peaceful, right into the parasympathetic nervous system. Calm the person, the being, the body, the nervous system. Don't do this. I wrote down here, I think I told you 10 to 45 seconds. It's also a psychic energizer. Please don't do it. If you're going to do left nostril or right, 45 seconds max. It's very powerful. You can repeat it, but at 45 seconds, just take stock of where you are and feel and what's going on for you. All right? All this is outlined. You've got all the copy at your fingertips. I put in a picture of the body just so you can remember what is it we're all doing and how come this is important, because it shows you where about high blood pressure, a pounding heart, tense muscles, et cetera, et cetera. That's just for your viewing pleasure. You have then a list of degriefing premises, such as degriefing, which is an oxymoron. There really is no way to degrief. It's like jumbo shrimp. I always quote George Carlin, jumbo shrimp, etc. Degriefing is the intention to use our grief as fuel for transformation. So, one of the things I say, grief is as universal as the smile. You can see a picture, and if somebody's grieving, you can tell it in their expression. Above all, grieving people need to be heard. And degriefing focuses on allowing, rather than forcing. We don't get over our losses. We change relationship to them. Again, my sister Donna, getting over loving Donna, I have no interest in that. Changing my relationship and working in her honor, that's how I manage my estrangement from my best friend and my sister. So you have the whole list here, and it's all for you. When I work with people, I often ask them to show me a picture of the loved one, or the pet, or the car, or the bird, or the rabbit. That brings that image right before us. And when I do online work, I ask them to please send me pictures so that I can put them on my screen. If I'm not doing Zoom, if I'm doing phone, I want to look at that child or that beautiful horse. I want to look at that as they tell me what happened and how they feel. This is one of my favorites. I call them either physical metaphors or somatic of the body colloquialisms. If I had access to all of you, I'd say, come on, call them out. I'll give you a few here. Feet of clay. I can't stomach it. Shoved down my throat. Teeth clenching. Uptight. Jaw gripping. Pain in the butt. Can't see straight. Bite your tongue. I'm all thumbs. I have 2 left feet. I have a green thumb. I have jaws of steel. People clench jaws and hands with grief. And in my face, task at hand, white knuckling, referencing fear. So why are these? They're not only enjoyable to recognize. If somebody tells me I'm carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders, our next session, someday again, I hope, I'll be able to do body work on their shoulders. In the meantime, I might tell them to take a hot bath, put a towel in the water, and drape it, a wet hot towel over their shoulders to soften their muscles, with lavender and Roman chamomile in the bath itself. So we can be creative. There's so many oils to choose from. Don't use oils that you just don't love, even if they're said to be fabulous. If you don't enjoy the scent, don't use them. These I don't have to go into very much. These are the phrases to avoid, such as, and I wrote these for COVID-19. Don't weep. It's better you didn't go to the hospital to see him because of the virus. He did not die alone. The nurse was with him. It would have been too awful for you to see. You can visit him at the mass grave. It was her fault for going to get her hair done. That's a real story. Right before the quarantine, a woman went and had her hair cut and colored and got really sick. And she kept going to work at the hospital. What did you expect? She didn't have protective equipment. The other losses might be something like, I know exactly how, the other statements to avoid. You must get on with your life. God needed another angel. These are phrases that people say because we don't know what to say and we don't know how to soothe the bereaved. It's even better to say, I don't know what to say. I've also given you what I would call the Degriefing Integrative Activities for Grief Transformation, and it's a partial list. These will touch on, I'm certain, something on this page is for everybody. And of course, one of them is attending church services, another one is chanting, another is working on photo albums. That is one of the questions I get asked a lot. I'm quarantined, what do I do? Well, you could go through your photos, you could go through your closets, you can write letters, you can write the book you've been promising to write. Excuse me, I just exposed that. Yes, you can in fact do things that the mind has said before, you know, I just don't have enough time to get to it. And Carolyn made a statement, you know, when you wear your pajamas and you do Zoom, only the top half has to look good. I heard a friend say I had my 8 a.m. pajamas and I got my 8 p.m. pajamas. And so some people say, you know what, even if you have nowhere to go, get dressed. It's a different psychological feeling. You know, go to somebody's at your door. I mean, maybe you're not going to answer it, but if you're in your pajamas, probably not going to even respond. So you have it two ways here. You have a nice, let me see how I get this to you. A nice long list that talks about water therapy, nature, self-expression, sound, movement, oils, essential oils for smell. And then for those that see things differently and think differently, let me see if I can see it, just 3 columns, body, mind, and spirit. We all are unique. Some of us are kinesthetic, we feel things first. Some of us are visual, we see things. Some of us are auditory, that's neuro-linguistic programming. So if a client says to me, God, I really hear you, then they're expressing their auditory tendency. Or I feel it, or I just can't see what you're saying. Now this is in person as well. And so listening to the words that you're involved in a conversation, a communication, gives you information that would be perhaps very easy to overlook. I added in here something about empathy and compassion. I wrote an article for a very lovely book called Techniques in Grief Therapy. I wrote a chapter, Creative Practices for Counseling the Bereaved. I have the last chapter in the book. My chapter's entitled Degriefing Caregiver Burden. Now, those of you that are in service to others, please be aware of the concept of compathy. It's a combination, an overload of empathy and compassion. Compathy. It leads to burnout, to compassion fatigue, empathy fatigue. Bereavement overload, when we're dealing with more than one. I worked with a woman today, let me demonstrate bereavement overload. She's 42 years old. Her mother died in December, her father died in January. She's now responsible for her grandfather and her developmentally disabled brother. In November, she was the daughter of 2 loving parents. She's now an orphan and a full-time caregiver. So we need to strategize for her ways to soothe herself, that she feels she can actually do her best service with her grandfather, who also has Alzheimer's, 85 years old, and needs surgery. So our work is how to keep her grounded, centered, and out of panic. We haven't even gotten to the depth of what she lost when her mother died and what she lost when her father died. We're working with the pragmatics of how she's managing her life in quarantine with 2 dependents in the household. So degriefing caregiver. Empathy is the action of understanding, being aware of, and sensitive to, and vicariously experiencing the feelings, thoughts of another, of either the past or present. They're not ours, but yet we can feel them because we are in empathic communion. Compassion is a sympathetic consciousness that we can perceive the stress and distress that others experience and our desire to alleviate it. This is very clearly explained to you in the article on page 20. It's only a 3-page article of Degriefing Caregiver Burden. This can be applied actually to any of your friends, loved ones, family that you're talking to. It does not have to be a professional client. Because right now, during quarantine, we're all caring for one another. We're sharing duties in the house, we're cooking, cleaning, helping. We're in communion with one another in quarantine. And those of us who live alone, we trust that Zoom and phones and emails will at least remind us. You know, social distancing does not mean social isolation and devastation. It just means we get our nourishment from those we love and relate to in a different way. And people who live alone, or people I know a couple who's 96 and 95, and the 96-year-old man is quite distressed. His whole life he worked to provide for his family. He lost most of his resources in the market. And at 96, he's having a hard time getting out of bed at all. So a pep talk daily is on my agenda. You know, walk around the house, do something to get your blood circulating. Now, Carolyn, Reverend Carolyn, I want to check with you because we are at the hour. We started about 10 minutes late. Do I have another 10 minutes for this and then questions? Tell me how you'd like to manage this.
Finish your 10 minutes and let's go to questions. Everyone, if you have a question, start placing your questions in the chat room and I'll be able to share them with Lyn when she's ready to start Q&A.
Okay. The reason that self-care at this point is optimally important is our personal attempts to avoid the psychological impact of quarantine. So self-care and good mood increasing activities, good mood increasing food. Alcohol is very tricky. Alcohol is thought to be a calmant that actually, for many, disturbs their sleep because of the sugar content and is actually ultimately a depressive. So if one of your friends or somebody you know is leaning on alcohol to get through this, depending on your relationship with them, ask permission. Could I share something with you that I learned? If they say no, let it be. Yet asking permission engages them. And a wonderful word to use is wondering. I'm wondering if it's okay if I share something with you that I learned. I'd love to send you something, but let me ask you first. Oh, I'm wondering what you're wondering. Sure, let's go to the next part. Different than you need or you must. I'm wondering if I can share something. And you can always, if you don't want to say that it's yours, you can say, I learned this from Dr. Lyn, or I read it on the CNN website. Sometimes that helps the expression of what you want to share. Just be authentic. This is by no means intending to criticize or judge you. I just want to share what I love. Because maybe this is somebody you'd go out and get a glass of wine with after work and you know. I personally know somebody who's drinking a bottle of wine a night. She's very unhappy also. Okay, then we go to the processes. So, an article on rituals, how to create a sankalpa, and Reverend Harriet knows all about that, and so she can certainly answer questions. I certainly will, and you have a wonderful resource there who's a highly trained professional, a loving being, and a competent, exquisite listener, and deeply compassionate and caring. So the sankalpa, the sankalpa information is here for you. The difference between a sankalpa and an affirmation is that it's a statement in the present that has nothing negative. And it's very unique because it's a noun and a verb. You create your sankalpa. Mine is, one of mine, I heal well. So when I had rotator cuff surgery last March, I just kept reminding myself, I heal well. Oh, the pain. Don't worry, I heal well. I was doing lots of self-talk. It's a verb because as I said it, I heal well. I heal well. Then it becomes a verb. As I practice my sankalpa, it takes on the form of a verb. It's all explained to you here. The other thing is the exercise of tratak, which regulates the pineal gland, resets the endocrine system. It's easy to do. I teach this on the phone. If anybody is struggling with the instructions, you can talk to Reverend Harriet, you can call me or email me, and I'll take you through it. And that's on page 32. It's the third of the practices that I recommend. Now, I could have recommended 300 practices because there's so many options. Remember, choice is infinite. These are tried and true. So I suggest that you start at least by reading them. Doesn't talk to you, doesn't touch your heart, look for something else. I have something in here for you on essential oils and the chakras. It's so curious here. There it is. And that's on page 35. This could stimulate you to Google chakra systems, and you'll see many different colors for the chakras. These are the 7 major energy centers. Here's something that's absolutely astounding. Anybody here old enough to remember Venus Paradise? That it was a paint by number? Guess what? According to psychologists, coloring is the best alternative to meditation. Okay, we can play with the kid in us and we can soothe the adult. When the mommy I worked with who lost the little boy to drowning, she went nowhere, leaving her coloring book and pencils at home. She got a mini-sized little coloring book, and when she felt the stress and the distress and the pain, she colored. Sometimes when she couldn't sleep, she grabbed her coloring book. Better option than an iPhone because of the blue light that will keep you awake. I even gave you a mandala in here to see if you like coloring. Okay. Basically, I even took another step into sharing information. A lot of people are going to turn to overeating for self-soothing. I have given you the name of one of my fabulous students who's now a wonderful grief practitioner, as Reverend Harriet is, and she works with nutrition and grief and amino acids. And she has taken her work, as I have also, teaching for Santa Clara Behavioral Sciences, training addiction specialists to talk about grief. She is in the clinics working with recovering addicts, offering different solutions to the pharmaceuticals or the whatever drug was there or alcohol was their choice. She's using amino acids, which are natural bodily functioning. Our body produces amino acids as we get older, it produces less and less. And I'm working with a young man who has been drunk for 10 years. His nutrition is suffering. It's not just about eating a balanced diet now. We have to get in there and refortify. And when a person turns to alcohol instead of food for 10 years, there will be effects we have to work with. He's in his early 30s. There's hope. He's young. He's strong. He's struggling, though, because at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, he wants vodka. He doesn't want a inositol or Tyrene. He doesn't want the amino, and he doesn't want to drink anymore. So we're doing a very strong experiment with him, as we have with others. You have 4 key questions on page 40. Defining and envisioning self. This is one of my colleagues, Vicki Panagiotakis, who worked at Hospice of the Valley for years. She's now up in Davis. I use these questions to know my clients better. I have a meditation here for you from Dr. Eugene Gendlin called Focusing. It's a somatic meditation. And he's actually a psychologist from the University of Chicago. He crossed a boundary in academia, and he included the body in psychotherapeutic work. What a concept. We all reference Dr. Gendlin. Even the tops in the field refer to Eugene Gendlin as one of the pioneers. You've got the meditation here. We're almost done here. I found this wonderful article, and I included it because I think it will stimulate some of your thinking. It was a study done, the development of the grief process scale through music therapy and songwriting for bereaved adolescents. And they found that when the adolescents who didn't believe they couldn't write a song sat down and wrote songs, that their grief diminished because they focused elsewhere. Maybe they wrote a song to the lost loved one, or the puppy, or the bird that flew away. So that is page 42. And it's just, I gave you excerpts, but you can find it if it appeals to you to read more. And then in conclusion, I gave you some suggestions on page 44, what I can possibly do during quarantine, suggestions for using your time in a nurturing, satisfying way. And then I gave you a list with gallows humor, because we need our humor now. If we lose our sense of humor, everything be a little more painful. So, for example, it says, my body absorbs so much soap and disinfectant lately, when I go to the bathroom, it cleanses my toilet. These are quirky. I didn't make them up, but they made me laugh. It's really quirky. My hands are so chapped from bleach, I don't even know where to start. Or every few days, try on your jeans to make sure that they still fit. Pajamas will have you believe all is well in the kingdom. So we've got to find some humor in the midst of what we're dealing with. So there you have your booklet. It's just loaded with my love and really good information. And if anything here puzzles you, or you want more information, please get in touch with me. I'm here for that. I had a near-death experience in 2009. And when I opened my eyes in ICU, I went, I guess my work's not done. So I'm here for the long haul. So I'm ready to answer questions. Please know that some of what you read is going to re-stimulate your own lost legacy. Nostril breathe, be gentle with yourselves. Sleep's very important now, and people are having trouble sleeping, including me. Sleep is where we get to rest our body. So I will hand this to Reverend Carolyn now, and then at the end I'll say goodbye again. But let's see what questions may have come in and that I can efficiently answer for you. And if there's anything I can't answer, I will get the answer and you'll hear it. So
Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been intensive and really well done. Thank you for providing us with so much information. Many of us are we provide spiritual counseling, spiritual direction, and we need to have the right kind of tools to use when we're working with those that come to us. So thank you very much for that. I want to call on Jeanette Simmons. Jeanette has a question that she would like to ask.
Okay.
Thank you much, Reverend Carolyn. And I know I didn't put it out there first when we were doing our chat as eloquently as I would like, but when you're talking to others, and Carrie, who invited me to participate tonight, so I thank my very good friend Carrie for introducing me to all of you. One thing that I think I've felt has been helpful for me when trying to engage with a friend that I'm concerned with, and that is, I use a sentence usually of, may I ask you a question? And
Mm-hmm.
I use that question to gain permission from them,
Mm-hmm.
to open up a dialogue. And is that something that you would advocate or would be okay with in opening that type of hard, sometimes crucial conversation?
Yes, I think that you are very lovingly tuning into a way to invite somebody to share verbally with you, rather than imposing your judgment, beliefs, or your will from a perspective that they need this. That never works. What works is inviting somebody. Using the word wondering is very skillful for me. I'm wondering if it's okay with you. I've been giving something some thought, and I really would like to know if it's okay if I bring it up, if it's not the right moment to focus on a conversation. You can think about my question. We can talk about it tomorrow or next day. This comes up because I care. This comes up not because I consider myself an expert or that I have all the answers. I ask your permission. If I could please run something by you that I'd like to explore with you, you tell me if that's okay. And believe me, I want your authenticity here. I don't want a yes if you're really not available. We can look at it another time. Then you're honoring whatever's going on for them. You're honoring your deep caring of them, and you are respectful in how you're approaching them. People love to know they're cared about. People don't like to feel that they're being judged when we share information with them. So I think the way you approached it, another thing that I find skillful is the Metta Bhavana hand position of my hand on my heart, my other over. I might look in somebody's eyes and say, put my hands there and say, this is a sensitive and dear moment. I really would like to talk about something. With your hands on your heart, you're demonstrating where you're coming from. I wonder if it's okay if I bring something up now, and if it's not the right moment, I value that. There's no urgency. How is that?
Yeah, would you see even your hand movements, like putting it towards your own heart, is kind of like your own vulnerability, your own heart, and you're like not pushing something against them, but you're just saying that this is something I hold dear and I want to share with you in dialogue, but if you're not ready quite yet, that's okay. It's right here. So we can open that door if you want to. Does that kind of...
That's fabulous, because you and I both know if I come at you like this, pointing a finger, you're backing off. And I want to give you all a little gift right here, because you very gracefully brought something up. I like to eliminate the word but. But
I do too.
Okay, so you said just no judgment, no criticism.
No, I do. I try to eliminate it, but yes.
So I'd like to share something with you. And if this is not the right moment, there's so much permission in an and there's no power play struggle or urgent need. I'd like to share something.
However, is what I try to evolve towards. Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I so appreciate your vulnerability and your openness. We really are all in this together, and nobody gave us guidelines. So we're kind of thinking on our feet, if you will. There's another colloquialism. Okay, I'll add it. Great. Thank you so much for the question. I love questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, and thank you for that demonstration. And Carrie would love to ask a question of you. Carrie?
Okay.
Hey, Reverend Lyn, thank you so much for sharing your life's work with us. This is such powerful information, and will go so far beyond this call, I think, for all of us to help so many other people. Would you mind demonstrating the nostril breathing? I've done it, but I just want to make sure that it's the same type of nostril breathing that I'm accustomed to, and I think other people might like to see you actually do the process.
Okay, so thank you for that. That's really wonderful. Most of us are familiar, if we've ever been to a yoga class, in the alternate nostril breathing, where it's a process of closing one nostril, putting our fingers right at the pineal gland at the third eye, starting with the left nostril, exhaling, inhaling, then changing and exhaling. The single nostril breathing is not complicated. There's no formula other than if we need to calm the system, we need to remember which is the cool, lunar, feminine nostril, which is the left. To calm the system very gently, either with my index finger or my thumb. I can support my arm if I'm going to do it for a while. And it's just breathing. I suggest that a person blows their nose first, whether allergies or just dust. Blow the nose and then close the nostril. I often use my middle finger. It seems to work with the shape of my face. I can hold my chin and I can just rest that way, and it's breathing. I'm just closing gently. If I have a big engagement and I'm bereaved and I'm so depressed and I know I have to function well, I might need to power up. Then I would close the left and do the same thing through the right. Another technique that some of you might know is called shining skull, which in the yogic tradition is called Kapalabhati, and that's the rapid fire breathing. Kapalabhati is translated as shining skull. So that is just, it's a belly breath that forces the air out of my lungs like a vacuum. So I don't know, I would put my hands here. I don't know how well you can all, can you see me on the big screen? Am I on your big screen?
Yeah, we see you.
Okay, so
Yeah, you're good.
the breath, can you all see me? It's I see all little boxes. And okay, so it's like this. It's not my shoulders. It comes from a contraction of the abdominals that forces the air out of my lungs, that creates a vacuum, and the body starts breathing itself. Now, that's not exactly what you asked for. That's just an alternate option if you just need to clear the cobwebs. The single nostril breathing is a very powerful, effective, and simple tool. So let's say we're not gathering in groups, but let's say you were at a group meeting and you just needed to get grounded. You can go into the bathroom and do 10 to 25 seconds of one nostril or the other, change your entire biochemistry because of the influx of oxygen. And it's just quite amazing. I would say before you share that with other people, practice it. Make sure that here's my premise. I don't recommend a book, a tool, a movie, unless I've seen it. Even if I'm told it's fabulous. Because if the person trusts me and the movie has an impact, they may want to talk to me about it. I cannot recommend something that I am not certain about. So if somebody comes home from Iraq and they've had a leg amputation, and I recommend the Tom Cruise film, Born on the 4th of July, and I never saw it, it would be doing a disservice. So anything you recommend, in the list I'm going to send you, you will have things there that if you can't get a hold of the book for whatever reason, you can always Google a synopsis. I'm not an Amazon fan. I'm not a Jeff Bezos fan. I don't use Amazon for my own reasons that he does not pay taxes. I do. So, and he's a bit wealthier than I am. You can go on Amazon and read synopses of books, and that can also help you decide how to deepen your own knowledge. The list I'll send you are books I've read, and there's difference between a referral and a recommendation. A referral is something I've heard. I'm passing it on to you to decide for yourself. Ultimately, you'll all decide for yourself. A recommendation, like I can recommend Reverend Harriet because I worked with her. If I hadn't, I could say, I've heard of this wonderful woman. I've not personally worked with her. I will give you her name and way to reach her. You must decide because I don't have the personal experience. Knowing, having worked with Reverend Harriet, I can speak for what I learned and I can recommend. So this tool with the nostril breathing, very important that you practice it and you go slowly and easily. The same with Tratak, which is equally powerful, using the optic nerve for up close viewing, and distance. It's the same. Tritok is the ancient version, I believe, of EMDR. It's using the optic nerve to relieve grief and trauma held in the system. So you might try it, and again, get in touch if you need some support with that. I hope that was helpful. We are in a hypervigilant state of arousal. Whether it's conscious or subconscious, our hind brain, the survival brain, is engaged. Mm-hmm. This is a 24/7 experience. Everything we are doing, cooking a meal, reading a book, washing our hands, there is a very poignant quality to those of us that are tuned into knowing that this is the most, for me, the most unpredictable period, the most insecure period. Am I wiping down my counter enough? Am I washing my hands enough? Am I eating well enough? Is my immune system ready should this virus come my way? When we have our survival mechanism engaged, we are producing cortisol in the system. It's the stress hormone. Adrenaline is a faster hormone, fight, flight, or fright. We're talking about a prolonged period of fear, insecurity, financial, emotion, psychological. We are hypervigilant, therefore we are hypersensitive. Noticing that you're feeling a little dizzy means a number of things. First question is, do you have dizziness in your life? Have you had dizziness at other times? Because any pre-existing condition can exacerbate. Number two, have you done everything you need to do so that you can look in the mirror and say, I am prepared for the unknown? Do I have bleach in my house? Do I have enough rubber gloves? Am I wearing a mask that is throwaway every usage, or do I have a mask I can wash, or do I have a professional, let's say a medical mask? I went out 2 days ago, I forgot to put my mask on. I went, oh, my mask. I had to turn around, go back, get my mask. And I went, okay, do I need gloves? Yeah, okay. Personally, I find breathing in a mask hot. You're breathing your own hot breath. Well, then the mind goes, it's worth it to stay safe. But the body's not that comfortable with the hot air coming right back into the face. So we're not so comfortable in our own skin. Mm-hmm. If you're feeling dizzy, then I want you to be super careful, because you don't want to fall. You don't want to injure. You don't want any reason to have to go seek out medical attention that's not imperative. The hypervigilance also creates an edginess in the nervous system. It's almost like a startle response. The only two fears that are natural to the human being are the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. Every other fear is learned. Well, I'm learning to see that people could kill me if I get close. Environment might be a great idea. A candle burning safely is a good idea. I have 3 behind me going. Hot showers, hot soaps, asking your body, what do I need to function as calmly and efficiently as possible? And for each person, it'll be a unique combination. The question that I pose back to you is, if this is a medical issue, the dizziness, then I am a PhD, not an MD. Mm-hmm. And I want you to get the advice from a proper medical doctor if the dizziness is part of a condition or is something new that you want to talk about. It could be high blood pressure because we're all a little nervous. And if that's the case, the single nostril breathing of the calming lunar side bringing your blood pressure down, eating foods that is not going to spike it. Some people have kicked back on not so much spice. And a calming grounding, chamomile tea, peppermint tea, according to your tastes and according to how you know yourself. If you know that more than a half hour of the news is going to get you dizzy, don't do it. Believe me, you'll get the news you need to get. And I hear Simon and Garfunkel. I get all the news I need on the weather report. That's Paul Simon. Okay, please differentiate if this is a reaction to all the stress. And believe me, people are breaking out people are getting hives. Anything can happen. Constipation, diarrhea, all of the extremes. Mm-hmm. If you're a coffee drinker and you're drinking a little too much coffee, you might substitute that. I'm not a nutritionist, but I'm very aware that certain foods I take in either stimulate me or make me tired. Mm. Your evening meal might be a common thing, and you might consider tryptophan at night for calming. This is why I have given you a Frances Holmes information, and she would love to hear from any of you. She's a specialist with this type of information, with the food and the nutrition.
All right, thank you. We have one more, and this will be from Deanna Mullins. And this is a juicy question. Deanna.
Oh.
Hi. Oh, well, I'm a nurse practitioner. I do primary care with veterans, and I'm currently working in a community living center or nursing home. And my question is around unprocessed, like the piling up of unprocessed past traumas and losses that have not been dealt with. And how can I, as a clinician, or how can we as a healthcare team support that person when their main method of coping is to shut out, shut down, or, kind of retaliate against? So this particular client definitely has PTSD from Vietnam, has his own history of suicide attempts many, many years ago when he got out of the service. And then his son killed himself about a year ago. And he's been living in a nursing home. He's paralyzed, for about a dozen years or so. And he's refusing care, which could put his own health at danger. And then he has these outbursts at staff sometimes. And to me, what it feels like is unprocessed trauma and unexpressed grief. And I'm just looking at how can I support him, and then also how can I support the staff in relating to him from a different context rather than to look at the behavior.
Okay, that's just an amazingly fabulous question, and of course quite intricate. And if I don't give you enough information in our allotted time here, I welcome a call from you. And I'm offering that. I'm not soliciting. I'm welcoming a call, and I will answer that more deeply.
Sure.
The first word that comes to mind is a word I use all the time. It's called normalizing. It's stating what's so in a non-judgmental, yet informative and inclusive way. And depending on your relationship with this gentleman, you might name it. Mm-hmm. You might explain to him that you've been observing from time to time that when he's too overloaded with stimulation, information, or confusion, that his responses are strong. Mm-hmm. Choose your words wisely. I call this psychosomatic semantics, choosing words that will encourage a release in the holding in the system. Mm-hmm. And so using very gentle wording with a person who's past traumatized. I'm working with a young man now who has had many past traumas, including observing a suicide, 2 in his family. You can actually say to him, my heart wants to connect with you. I don't want to step on your toes, and I don't want to make assumptions that by naming things that you're not ready to talk about.
Exactly.
Yet I want you to know something. I really care enough that I'd like to find a way to reach that part of you that can hear me, that can trust me. And another thing that's very skillful with a person who is a bit skeptical about the world and about other people's interventions into their lives.
Yes.
You can say this. I did, take my words as I mean them, please. I did this very informative seminar. And you know, you came to mind. And I felt you in my heart. And I'm wondering how you and I can establish a relationship that's nurturing for you, and that I'm not afraid that I'm going to upset you or overwhelm you. So I want you to know I'm thinking about that in respect to you, with respect to you. And also because of my training, I have a sense that there's certain incidents in your past that are alive within you that you don't share. And that's your right. Yet, I want you to know that I'm available to talk with you and really hear you. And I want to make that offer to you. You don't have to answer me now. I'll stop back later, tomorrow, whatever. Because I'm being guided. I'm here during the coronavirus. I'm here because of my devotion to my skill set, to the work I do. I'm a nurse practitioner because I love people. And I see that if a person is abrasive, is not gentle enough, it doesn't work for you. So I want to offer myself and learn from you and with you how I can serve you, support you, and be available to meet your needs. And I have tools, and I have different ways we can work. I don't have a preconceived notion. I'm not intending to fix, rescue, or save you. I want to relate to you. And I asked your permission, and I'm wondering if you would please consider this, because for you to come up into my consciousness in a seminar, I want you to know that you have touched my heart. And I'm asking your permission whether this might be something that you're willing to entertain or explore with me. And then let him be. Tell him I have other duties, got to go on to another task. I just wanted to meet you. This would be a perfect time for the hands on the heart. And that you look at him and meet him eye to eye, face to face, heart to heart, with no expectation and no assumption. And you can actually say that as well. I don't assume and I don't expect. I'm offering and wondering. I'm going to tell you what I'm thinking, and your answer will come when it comes. I just want you to know that I'm truly available to you to share the best of me with you, because I know that inside there is very different than what you let a lot of people see. And I'm not pushing, I'm inviting. How is that, or part of that, or the tone of that? Is that good? Is it work?
That's extremely helpful. Extremely helpful. Yeah.
And you know, I'm working with a young man now, as I mentioned, with lots of loss and lots of trauma. And I'm going gently, because when we know somebody's been severely traumatized, we don't know when. We might just hit a nerve and we'll ask ourselves, what happened? And so with this young man I'm working with, I said the same thing. You're carrying a lot of information, a lot of loss, and a lot of trauma in your body, in your psyche. Let's go gently, step by step. Tell me the most difficult thing you've experienced. Talk to me. Just, you know, give him the, hi, kitty. Give him, no, I love animals. I have 4 cats and a puppy. Invite him with all of your charisma, caring, and compassion. And it's his choice. And then you share that with the staff after. And if you want to call me, do so. Because you've touched on something that's extraordinarily important, because we have a lot of people living with unprocessed grief, embodied grief, complicated grief, and traumas that live in the body that can be triggered at any time. And those of us in the field of service, we want to truly invite them and metaphorically embrace them and tell him this too. This is key. Whatever you share with me, I will hold confidentially. You can share with your colleagues without disclosing specifics. Let him know that anything he tells you, because he might have shame, maybe he killed people, maybe he watched people get killed and he's never been able to name it. Maybe he feels responsible for his son's suicide. There's so many maybes. And you want him to know that you're not coming to him as an expert who has all the answers. You're coming to him human to human, as a woman who feels him because you're empathic. You're an empathetic human. And because you feel so much, you want to be available to him in a way that would serve him. That's what you're asking permission, is a little bit of connection to know the best way. It might be bringing him a Stephen Levine tape. It could be a John Kabat-Zinn meditation. You can ask him. And if you email me, I'll send you my intake form and you'll see some of the questions that I ask people. And I also do this as we close. I say to a client, let's say I'm working with a couple, a woman who's thinking of divorcing her husband. And she's coming to me to process and to express. I might say to her, I work intimately. I'm very authentic and I'm very relational. And I might, ask you things you're not ready to answer. So if I ask you something and it feels too intimate or too soon, I'm counting on you to tell me. So I might ask this woman, are you still sleeping together? Because I need to know where's the dynamic, not because I'm interested in their sex lives, but because I would use that information to understand how estranged are they or what's going on. And I might hear, no, we still share a bed, but we haven't touched in 6 months. It gives information. That's why you have to promise confidentiality and be so real and so vulnerable. And with a disclaimer, let that man know you're not on the spot. I have a communication. I want to share that. And I want you to know it's my way of letting you know I care. And if I need to take you out of this room, is he sharing a room with other people? Then you might need to take him to the visitor's room, get somebody to wheel him so he knows he's safe, private, confidential, and he's that cared for. And that might touch his heart, and he might cry a lot. And Reverend Harriet brought up something that she learned from me, and I'm going to use it here. It's okay to cry with your clients, just not more than your clients. All right, so go for it. Let me know how you're doing. I'm here to help. And I respect your question so much. He's a lucky man to have you in his life.